So I'm going to start off with a talk about the settlement development in Bronze Age and Early Iron Age, Western Jutland, Denmark, but with the majority of my interpretations on the Early Iron Age. At the onset, I'd like to stress the complexity of our archaeological settlement record and large amounts of data that is generated during these excavations. In a settlement such as this one at Abrinken, there are hundreds of observations on the relationships between the main features. So we need a very rigorous methodology to untangle just the main trends in the settlement development with any certainty, as Ali just talked about what Mads Hodde had been doing in Snede. To this, we may then add some questions on the lifetime of the biographies of our individual houses, periodic abandonment of the site not visible in our site record necessarily, not to mention this rather coarse chronological resolution we are often working with, as well as the complex daily life and social relationships that created basically this imprint of the settlement. We see here presented as a site plan. The size and complexities of the dataset is one of the reasons why so many excavated settlements are never analyzed in detail and at best published as a site plan without additional information on its development. At least I say that is one of the reasons why I haven't ever gone into any detail with my excavations until I did my PhD thesis. In the following, I'd like to highlight 2 points. And the first one being that the incorporation of multiple scales of settlement analysis of this complex and ever-growing settlement materials is worthwhile. The second one, that the analysis of settlement development in high resolution, whenever that is possible, may allow us to investigate into relations between the different households of the local communities. So the first part of this paper will present the state of research and how development-led archaeology is today changing our ideas about the settlement development. The second part will be a short introduction to some of the results from our work on the high-resolution phasing of late Preroman and early Roman Iron Age hamlets. And I will conclude with just a short outline of some of these challenges we currently face in Danish settlement archaeology. Just to give you an idea of where we are headed now, this is Western Jutland in Denmark. The primary study you see on the right, and the sites marked with red are the settlements from the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age studied in detail. But I will also draw on a few sites from the region in my general overall conclusions. Western Jutland has the advantages of a long research history and from a Danish perspective, very well-preserved settlement traces. Back in the early 20th century, heathland was more widespread than today, and settlements preserved in the heathlands were the first to be excavated during the 1920s and 1930s. These early small-scale investigations, such as the one you see here from Skørbæk Hede on the left here, focused on the excavation of individual houses. They revealed a lot of information of daily life, but did not allow many observations on the development of either the single house or the settlement at large. That changed drastically with the advent of machine excavation of the topsoil in the late 1950s. So such as you see here on the right from Dangsted. In the 1960s and 1970s, a major campaign of large-scale excavations was initiated, firmly embedded within the settlement research agenda of the day, an agenda set by the Professor of Archaeology at the University of Copenhagen, Professor C.J. Becker. This led to the excavation of entire hamlets, such as Grøntoft, one you see here, and thus a major breakthrough in our understanding of size, organization and development of especially the Iron Age settlements and local communities. Large-scale research excavations have had a major impact on our understanding of the settlement development. An explanatory model of the development was formulated based on basically 3 principles: a limited lifespan of the post-built houses, and thus a constant displacement of houses and farmsteads. 2, the eventual nucleation of farmsteads into hamlets and villages. And 3, a continued rotation of the entire settlement within the boundaries of a limited primary resource source area, the model of the wandering village, so to say. And this limited resource area basically being what eventually became the parish. And actually you can see it here. This is the parish of modern day Hodde. During the last 3 decades, large-scale salvage excavations in advance of urban development and infrastructure projects have followed these earlier research excavations. Here's just one example of the mass excavations from the outskirts of the city of Esbjerg, and one of the sites, you can just barely see the houses from one of the sites from the early Roman Iron Age there. These development-led excavations have led to an immense increase in the number of sites. My own graph of what that looks like from early Iron Age in Western Jutland. Note how especially the number of settlements has virtually exploded since the introduction of machine stripping in the late 1950s. The many settlements excavated due to the development-led activities have also led to an increase in the diversity of the settlements, a diversity which challenges our traditional model of settlement development. So now to start at the regional scale, if we are to look at the different scales we might start to investigate. As a result of this long research history and the many excavations, we today have a pretty good idea about the regional site distribution, and can, for the early Iron Age at least, draw a picture of an overall intensified settlement density. Here I'm showing you a point pattern analysis of site distributions for each period from the late Bronze Age to the late Roman Iron Age. All of these are presented at the top. Differences in site density are highlighted by subtracting the site density analysis from 2 consecutive periods, here presented at the bottom. Green and blue marks a decrease between 2 periods, while orange and red marks an increase in site density between 2 different periods. Throughout later prehistory, there is a nucleation of sites toward the favorable areas and their specific resources. During the pre-Roman Iron Age, there is a distinct move towards favorable marshland areas at the coast, and an abandonment of the formerly inhabited inland areas, for instance along the River Congo, areas you see down here. While a resettlement along the River Congo takes place in the interior during the early Roman Iron Age. This highly dynamic settlement development can be supported by analysis on a micro-regional scale. Yeah, let's shoot your map down. Oh, anyway, that was supposed to be a map of all the sites I'm talking about, and which this graph is referring to. Here's one example from all the longhouses excavated in the favorable coastal area at Oxbow, presented as a diagram. Excavations on multiple sites have uncovered a growing settlement intensity in the pre-Roman and early Roman Iron Age, and then a complete abandonment with a single house from the late Roman Iron Age and only one house from the Germanic Iron Age in this entire area. This development is actually not unique for the Oxbow area. If we look at Vorbasse, my primary area of study, 12 out of 14 long-established Iron Age settlements are abandoned in the 2nd century AD. So the results of the development-led excavations are now undermining the universality of the concept of the wandering village. In some places it's a fairly good and specific model, especially in the places it was established on. But in other places it just doesn't explain our settlement, the settlement development. So the results, indeed the settlement pattern are much more dynamic, with major displacements taking place in both the 3rd century BC and 2nd century AD. If we shift our scale of interpretation to the level of individual settlements and settlement areas, The new development-led excavations have resulted in a more varied picture of this development of settlements and local communities as well. The individual settlements of Bronze Age and early Preroman Iron Age are all very labile, and often the distance between two potentially contemporary farmsteads exceeds 150 meters. Here, just given one example of this, the site of Abrinken. Two early Bronze Age houses, not necessarily contemporary, but potentially contemporary, and at a fairly long distance. And then also a small burnt down granary completely isolated from Bronze Age houses in general, but C40 dated to the early Bronze Age. The picture of widespread settlement changes gradually in the 3rd century BC when the farmstead starts to nucleate. This is illustrated with the sequence from Grøntoft, a site very neatly analyzed by house typology by Preroman. Initially, farmsteads are situated widespread across the area, but there's a movement of farmsteads that suggests that the local community gradually moved around in the area together. In late 4th century and early 3rd century, here marked in orange and green, the settlement starts to contract. And finally, in late 3rd and early 2nd century BC, the farmsteads are in the site almost all situated behind a common fence down here in the very bottom. So in the late Bronze Age and early Preroman Iron Age, we find short-lived farmhouses spread across wide areas. They all built to last for maybe just a generation, and the physical structures of the farm is normally restricted to just one farmhouse. But that starts to change in the 3rd century BC. This first major reorganization of settlement patterns, the nucleation of single farms into small clusters or even small hamlets in the 3rd century BC, coincides with the appearance of fences and outhouses on the farmsteads. During the late Pre-Roman and early Roman Iron Age, the farmhouses become sturdier. I'll show a comparison of the size of potholes in a moment. And especially the large farms stay in exactly the same spot with their main houses built up to 4 times in the very plot where we find them from the beginning of the settlement. With the major reorganization in the 3rd century, the complexity of settlements also starts to grow. In the interior of Western Jutland, common fences surround some settlements completely. These common fence settlements are to a large extent more neatly organized than their clustered counterparts in the coastal area I just showed you before. And as you can see here at Hodde, the settlement will last for several phases in exactly the same spot. In the early Roman Iron Age, the hamlets continued to develop as small and rather organic clusters in the coastal area. In the interior, new settlements are established at this point, with a general resettlement along the River Congo, I'll show you in the regional analysis. These are different in their layouts from the cluster settlements, as should be obvious here. And they're also from the earlier common fence settlements of the interior. The new villages are organized in rows of rectangular plots of the same size that you can see here. And apart from that, the development of individual farms follows the development we see in all the farms of the coastal sites. The plots are often fenced off, there's a gradual increase in the number of outhouses, and we witness an increase in the stability of individual farmsteads in the same plot throughout several phases of the hamlet's lifetime. So, on the level of the individual farmstead and households, we now have a very consistent picture of the development of these farmsteads. Throughout later Scandinavian prehistory, the longhouse is the central element of the farmstead, with outhouses and fences becoming more and more common in pre-Roman Iron Age onwards. In some longhouses, we find traces of a byre at one end, and in the rare occasions where cultural layers are preserved, we find traces of fireplaces and concentrations of the broken pottery in the other end. So the longhouses are generally considered the direct physical embodiment of an individual economic unit of one household. But would like to raise a voice of concern here on the universality of this model. Not all, even well-preserved longhouses have traces of a fire. And we do also find the odd fireplace, the house offerings, and traces of food production in some of the smaller buildings normally considered outhouses. Finds that may indicate that they're used as living areas. So not all longhouses are necessarily express the presence of individual household, and not all members of a household are necessarily living in a longhouse. At least more secondary members of households may live in the increasing number of smaller houses found in the Iron Age farmsteads. Unfortunately, the large-scale machine-aided excavations we are undertaking today have resulted in a declining interest in the household level of analysis in general, and most of our data with observation of intimate details of daily life stem from the excavations of the 1920s and 1930s. So we have only got a rather limited database to base our interpretation of the function and life biography of individual houses on. One thing I would like you to notice here is now how post holes grow in size. From the late Bronze Age and throughout the early Iron Age, the size of posts and post holes seems to suggest that the houses are built to last much longer, in especially the early Roman Iron Age. An observation that corresponds with a number of discernible phases in the long-lasting settlements and with the frequency of additional repairs and replacement of, for instance, fences. And here should be a very nice graph, again showing you how this starts to go on. But anyway, in the pre-Roman Iron Age, we see in the early pre-Roman Iron Age, late Bronze Age, we see that the phases, when we can establish them chronological, only seems to be 30-35 years long, while the phases of early Roman Iron Age, the longest phases, may be as long as 80 to 110 years, considering tell-site settlements in northern Jutland, for instance, where we do have very masked layers of occupation on them. Anyway, let's move on to the second part of the paper, and hopefully there will be no more missing graphs. Here we shall have a closer look at how the long-lasting settlements develop into still more organized hamlets, and how we might use this development to further our insights into the organization of the local community. Here I've chosen Abrinken, but the development is largely the same for the 6 out of the 7 settlements I've analyzed in detail. Here we see the individually fenced farms from the late pre-Roman Iron Age, moving a bit west and slowly evolving throughout the early Roman IronAge into basically a U-shaped settlement around an open space, with larger farms placed at the far ends of the U. I'll show you that later on. The fencing of these farms and in these sites is not universal. The most elaborate fencing is found between the enclosed common interior, public space in the interior there, seen at Hedde, for instance, and the individual farms. So some farmsteads are not fenced off towards their nearest neighbours, but more often fenced off towards a public area. This is also evident at Hodde, seen here on the right, where some of the later farms have fences built towards the common interior, but share courtyard with other longhouses. We've got a good examples found down here, where they share common public space, or share public space in between these two houses, but they're fenced off with public space in the interior of the village. In Hedde, as in other settlements from the coastal area, we find that longhouses all turn their by towards the central public area. There are openings in the fences and gables, here marked with arrows. And outside these openings in the gables, we find stone-lined pits for collection of animal manure. So manure is directly shoveled out of the byre into the public area in the interior of the village. And we start to wonder whether these local communities actually have a more communal attitude towards, for instance, cereal farming, while their animals are still the property of individual households. They do literally throw out a valuable asset into the public area, the manure, while they keep it away from their own farmyards, and they keep their livestock within the farmyards or within their houses. Now in Hodde we find that the largest farm up here is completely enclosed by a fence. This elaborate fencing of the largest, or alternatively two of the, or three of the large farms in the hamlets, is a trait we also find in all the settlements along the coast. The inhabitants of one farm, basically my personal favorite here at Billum, have rebuilt the fence at least 7 times in order to restrict movement between the public area and the private farmyard of the settlement's largest farm. And the last phase of the farmyard may only have been accessible through one of these small outhouses here if the interpretation of this fence is correct. No matter what we see is that they elaborate on the fence openings of a lot of these large farmsteads. You can see that in the early phase down here, Billum, and the same is true for the fence over here, where we have secondary post holes right next to the fence opening. To my mind, the small house at Billum and the secondary post holes of Møllemarskov show that the gateways to these farmsteads are purposefully elaborated. We occasionally find burials either within the fence line or in close connection to the fence, as seen here on 2 farms from Abrinken. The individuals analysed are all adults. At least some of them were buried while the fences were still in use, and at least one of them was buried with a spearhead. The interred adults in the fences of these long-lasting farmsteads are most likely deceased inhabitants of social importance, and the burials stress the interconnectedness of the plot, the farmstead, and the inhabitants, the whole idea of a long-lasting family line and household. Though the fences are introduced to restrict access between a public and a private space, the space used by individual farms within settlements are negotiable. This is evident at Hodde. Here some farmsteads expand and build on what used to be the plot of neighbouring farmsteads. This is seen here in phase D. A growth in the number of farmsteads lead to a division of plots, and even the largest farmstead at the very far left corner give up a part of its former area to make room for division of a neighbouring farmsteads into 2, and the division that is seen below. The same happens to one of the larger farmsteads in the southwestern corner. The longhouses from phase C, here marked the black outline, is moved west to give room for a new longhouse down the line, and the later phase, here marked in grey. Again, we see how longhouses are moved into otherwise fenced off plots, and new longhouses are added towards the public area in the middle of the village, while apparently sharing the more private space of the farmyard with the farmsteads along the common fence. So private space is negotiable, at least between neighbouring farmsteads, and when common necessity arises. As you may have noticed, the larger farms of Hodde, marked in red here, are found dispersed throughout the entire hamlet. All these large farms are amongst the oldest farmsteads in the village. They are the ones with the sturdier fences, and in between them we find smaller farmsteads in very close proximity to the larger ones, especially the ones that were added in later phases. This is also true in the somewhat smaller clustered farmsteads, hamlets from the coastal area. Here you see the large farmsteads marked in colour. They found at they're found at the far ends of the open space, and at both Møllemarskov West and Abrinken, the 2 largest farms merge each other across the open space. Indeed, you can actually stand in this longhouse up here, look out through an elaborated opening in the fence, in through the opening in the fence at the far end of the site up here, into the interior of the longhouse of your opponent, so to say, at the other end of the village. And that's more than 100 meters in between these 2 farms, so it's fairly neat space. This leads me to a last observation on the relationships between farmsteads. Larger farmsteads are not just placed at the far end of the open village space, but in a dominant position at the highest point. So it's also visually dominant. And the larger farms in some settlements also have a tendency to be in a less accessible position than the smaller farmsteads. so that they're not as accessible to the entire village community as some of the smaller farmsteads. And here we have this the site of Hodde with this 27 farms in all, where some of the larger farm sites are actually very withdrawn from the public space as much as possible. Now, I hope I've shown that the untangling of life history of the hamlets may give a glimpse of the interconnection between different farms and thus the interplay between the different households in such a local community. But the high-resolution phasing of entire hamlets is often problematic, relying on building typology, observations on how buildings relate to each other across open space, and with an uncertainty to the contemporaneity or even chronology of the buildings in different parts of the plot. So, to conclude, the development-led excavations have unveiled a much more dynamic and diverse pattern of settlement and settlement development. Indeed, these excavations work to our advantage as a random sample across the landscape. The complex patterns are calling for new and more sophisticated explanatory models, and they are best analyzed using multiple scales of analysis. The large-scale excavations allow us to investigate the developments of entire local communities through the long time spans and the interrelations between different households. But the development is not all hunky-dory, so to say. We are in dire need of better dating of the excavated settlements, and time pressure, limited economy, and the use of machinery on large-scale excavations has resulted in a very limited amount of data that might be used in more detailed analysis on the household level. So our challenges, as I see them in Danish archaeology, we need to develop better dating schemes for entire settlements, both the well-preserved and long-lived settlements I've shown some examples of here, as well as the more labile and widespread settlements. We need to make life histories of selected, well-preserved individual farmsteads the level of analysis, in addition to the analysis of entire settlements. And we need to do this using a multi-proxy approach in the analysis of activities of these farmsteads. Now, I've been talking here about settlements that was excavated back until the year 2002-2003. And from all these settlements done, where 6 out of 7 settlements was done by development-led archaeology, from all these settlements I've only got, I just recounted it last night, I've only got two examples of an analysis of macrofossils from, just 2 contacts where we've actually analysed macrofossils. And I've got the C14 dating from 3 longhouses out of 729. So that's the state of Danish archaeology as it is today. Thank you.